Good girl. Good girl. All right, stay out of the beds, okay? Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. This is the Sunday garden question and answer video that I do on Sundays. You can ask questions down below this video and I pick from those each week to answer. The following week, there were an absolutely ton of questions this past week and good questions, so I appreciate that. If I don't get a lot this week, I'll go back and pick some more, but I think I got 15 or 16 off of this list from last week. So thanks again for everyone for participating. I do have I did start, Holly's laying down right here below me. I did have a giveaway that I announced last week for a consultation with me. And what I did was I pulled a name off of each of the videos on the other channel, the Garden Plants with Jim Putnam channel. And so I pulled a winner. I pulled somebody from each of those videos, and then I have the names of the, I guess it's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 10 or 11 people, anyway, that participated in it. I'm not going to name all of the names, but all of you are in here, and nobody ended up with a second chance. I thought for sure with that many chances that somebody would have been pulled off a video twice, but okay, so I'm going to reach in here and pull the winner. The winner is Dorinda Jenkins. She has probably commented on, I don't know how many videos that she's commented on of mine. So happy to see her name pulled out of the cup. But if you'll contact me at that horttube@gmail.com email address, we can set up a time to meet. That's exciting for me as well. And I honestly I recognized probably almost every name on that list. So again, thank you guys for participating in the giveaways and on the channel and liking videos and commenting and all the things that you do that help support, make the videos move up in search. So let's get started on some questions from this past week. Let's see, somebody in Raleigh has things to move around, and they've got river birches in their yard, wanted to know when they would move things around, and now is the time to be moving all your things around. I bring up the river birches mainly because river birches are really hard to plant around and to dig around. The roots are just awful. If you've ever had a river birch, you know what I mean. And that I've mentioned that root slayer shovel in a video a few days ago. That may be something that you want to invest in if you do have birches and you're going to be planning on doing a lot of gardening around birches. The root slayer shovel. Somebody asked me if I have covered voles, and I have not covered voles. I've been super lucky at this place thus far that I have not had vole issues out here. I know the struggle. I know the struggle well. I did have issues with them at the old house, and I haven't covered them. I'll do a video at some point talking about it. It's when I was at Plant Delights interviewing Tony Avent. You will have seen that video by the time you see this video. A lot of their beds are, they mix permatil into their beds to keep them from causing them issues. But, permatil is one way, as a strategy, if you know there's certain plants that the voles are going after, permatil is somewhat effective against them. Let's see. Somebody asked me about where I buy tools. In the past, I've just been an equal opportunity tool purchaser. Any place that, Home Depot, Lowe's, my local garden center, wherever. I mean, I was, as a landscaper, a lot of times just had to grab tools quickly, or wholesale. Had some access to wholesale places, but I'll order some, I'll order them off of Amazon as well. And I've got tools linked down below on this video, the trenching shovel, or a shovel that's similar to my trenching shovel. I've had that trenching shovel that I use for, I don't know, maybe 20 years now, and you can see I've taken about 4 or 5 inches off the end of it. It's worn down. I can't find that exact one anymore, so I'd love to replace it, but like I say, every other one I've found has slightly different angle, and amazingly, when you get used to something, you don't want to adapt. Okay, somebody said they read that they should clean their pruners between plants when they're pruning. That would only be true if you had diseased plants or you have plants that have potential to have diseases. So if your hydrangeas have leaf spot issues, if roses, anything that's likely to have disease problems or has in the past had disease problems, you may want to clean your pruners in between you know, luckily for me, thus far, I don't have that to worry about. And really, most of the time, that's going to be from the same plant to the same kind of plant. If I jump from pruning this loropetalum behind me over to pruning my abelia, I'm not going to worry about it. Most of the things aren't going to jump from, you know, those two plants. But it would only be necessary, in my mind, if the plants were diseased or have disease potential. Okay, let's see. Somebody asked me about relocating daffodil timing. This would probably not be a good time to do it as they're breaking ground. They need to go through the process now of growing, blooming, and then recharging after they flower. So sometime mid to late spring, that foliage will start to die back. And when it starts to die, when it's almost completely died back, but you can still see where the bulb is, that's really the time to get them out of the ground and move them quickly over to another place. So they need at this point to go through the growth and the recharging. But do it while you can still see the foliage. Once they completely disappear under the ground, it becomes hit and miss, and you'll stab them with the shovel and mess them up. Okay, somebody has some hardwood mulch that matted. They put down about 5 inches of hardwood mulch, and it's just matted down. It's not breaking down, it's just become a solid mat. Usually that kind of tells me your soil is not, you know, your soil's not really alive. You know, there's nothing down there working on that, you know, working on that hardwood mulch. I do, you know, caution against putting down too much hardwood at one time. You know, I'll put down 2 or 3 inches at the time, and I'll do it a couple times a year rather than trying to do it all at once with 4 or 5 inches. I don't mind putting down more of wood chips. Like I can put wood chips deeper, but wood chips come with not just the wood, they also come with the green parts of the plant too. The whole tree was ground up in the machine. And so it tends to be like jet fuel for the microbes in the soil and tends to break down even from a thicker stand. And it also doesn't mat quite as much. The person asked me if they should have been turning the mulch all year, if that would have made some sort of difference. No, definitely not, because you'd end up with tons of weeds. What you need to do at this point is fertilize. I think throwing fertilizer over the top of it, giving some nitrogen to, you know, that the microbes need to break that stuff down is probably what you need to do at this point. And then use a little thinner amount each time, but that's the way I would go about that. Somebody asked me, they're in Zone 7B in Oklahoma, and they have some gold mop cypress. They have a line of gold mop cypress, and the 2 that are slightly in more shade are fine, and the ones that are out in more sun have a little bit of tip burn on them. I would imagine this is, it's not so much the sunlight, although I think gold mops do a little better in part shade than they do in full sun in Zone 7, 8, or 9. You know, they'll grow from 5 to 9. The further south you go, probably a little more shade is needed. But I think as much as anything, what you get out there in the middle part of the country is you can get really cold temperatures, and then the wind blow across them, and the sunlight shining on them at the same time. So you got the sun taking water out of the plant, and the wind, you know, adding to that. And so probably that combo of sun and wind is your actual issue, and having them in a slightly more protected area, which for you could be shade or on the other side of the house, whatever. But it's the combo, I think, of the sun and the wind together. Okay, somebody asked me, they got a Chicago fig. They're in western North Carolina. Wanted to know the planting time. They just got it bare root or something. You want to wait until after your last frost. Wanted to know if they should just keep it as a container plant. I don't know if you're in Zone 6B or 7A. If you're in 7A, if you put it in a protected space, needs sunlight, but someplace that around your foundation that's still sunny would be ideal. It's better off in the ground. Figs make terrible container plants. Some are sold as container plants, you know, because they're smaller growing varieties, but I've never, I mean, in the nursery business, I would plant my figs in the spring in the 3-gallon pots, and I wanted them sold that fall or before they woke up the following spring. If they stayed in the pot more than 12 months, they were a root-bound mess. You couldn't water them enough. I water them twice a day by the end of summer. I've been to nurseries where they have secondary watering going on their figs in the late summer. They get so root-bound. Okay, Somebody asked me about manure versus just organic compost. There's not really a lot of difference between them. The manure may have some more nutrients in it, you know, meaning nitrogen or something like that. So I'd be careful using a lot of it, but there's not a lot of difference in how they will wake up your soil and improve your soil. The only part of this question that was kind of concerning was they were going to use it for improving their clay. Either one would be great top dressed across your clay. And then as you dig holes, plant plants, a little bit of it will get mixed in, but I would not till that into that gray clay. Any organic material that you till into that organic, into that gray clay can tend to make your soil very boggy. So keep that in mind. I wouldn't till that stuff in, just put it across the top. And as you plant things, a little bit of it will get mixed in. But it'll help your soil from the top down. Okay, let's see. Somebody asked me tips for transplanting a 2-year-old serviceberry. My only question here was it B&B? Was it like a big one that you planted? Because that could be hard to move. If it was in a container, 3-gallon, 7-gallon container, and it's only been in the ground for 2 years, I think you could move it right now with very little problem. If you want to root prune it a little bit and wait a few weeks, that's fine as well. But I don't think you'd have any problem moving a 2-year-old tree that was planted from a small container. Very large 25-gallon container or, you know, B&B tree may be just difficult to move in general because it's going to be heavy pulling it out. Okay, but now, and I don't think you'll have any problem with it. Just don't bury anything that's not buried currently. So, I mean, don't put mulch up the stem or soil or anything like that. Somebody asked me about soil conditioner versus compost, what to dress with. I mean, compost is kind of a soil conditioner, but I think when they're talking about soil conditioner, they're talking about pine bark fines as a soil conditioner. I think compost is better to top dress with because pine bark fines will float. I've talked about that in last week's video, actually, about just pine bark in general floating. But I use pine bark soil conditioner, pine bark fines mixed with compost for my annuals. And it doesn't float away if you'll mix it with the compost. So you can do the combo together or just the compost, but I wouldn't do the bark by itself. Okay, somebody asked, is pine straw as beneficial as hardwood mulch or compost for the soil? Definitely not. I like to use pine straw occasionally. About every 4th or 5th time I mulch, I'll use pine straw here because it's available to me. And it will let some of this organic material break down. You know, I've mulched 2 or 3 times now. I've got the leaves out here. I'm about to mulch again. At some point, just like this other person that had 4 or 5 inches of hardwood mulch matted down, at some point I want to let some of this break down and I'll pine straw in between. And it seems to help, you know, get air, you know, it doesn't mat down quite as much. And so about every 5th time I pine straw, but it definitely does not improve the soil in the same way that hardwood mulch or any kind of bark or compost will improve the soil. Not to say it's bad for it either. It's just not as beneficial. It just kind of melts away. You know, it kind of shrinks up and shrivels away over time. Somebody asked. We talked about in the other video about plastic ground cover cloth. You know, weed barrier. Easy for me to say. The weed barrier causing problems. You know, with the plastic breaking down in the future. And then wanted to get my opinion about the plastic netting that the sod growers use. Same thing. I would prefer not to have the plastic netting in the sod. A lot of the fescue sods have it. I did not have it in the zoysia. It doesn't mean that some zoysia doesn't have the plastic netting in it, but I know it always is in the fescue, bluegrass sod. It's just a plastic netting that helps hold the sod together when they run the machine, you know, and cut the sod out. I don't like it. I wish it didn't exist. I've had pulled more of that stuff up than you can imagine. I have pulled more of that stuff out from lawnmower blades than you guys can imagine. I mean, just nightmares of that stuff coming up and running, you know, running a lawnmower over it and it just, you know, messing with your machinery. So I wish it didn't exist. Can't do anything about it, unfortunately. Compost. Okay, somebody asked me about using compost and pine fines for potting soil. I'm going to do that exact same thing. What are you doing? You can use compost and perlite or compost and pine fines, compost and something for your potting soil if you want to. It works great. All of my pots this season are going to be, I'm not going to use any peat moss. I am using peat moss in a video you're literally going to see tomorrow because I had one more bag of potting soil that I'm using for start some seeds. But other than that, after that, I'm going to use compost. I've already bought the compost. It's already here. Somebody asked me, they're in zone, I can't remember if it was zone 5 or 6, and they've got a wet area and they want a ground cover for it just to reduce the mulching and that kind of thing. Up there, I mean, you can use Acorus, like Sweet Flag. There are Carexes that will work. Carex works great in wet areas. You can use Creeping Jenny. Believe it or not, like the gold, the lemon coral sedum. You know, sedums aren't supposed to grow in wet places. That thing will grow anywhere. But here's the thing. Here's the thing about planting in wet places. You can't, I don't care what anybody tells you about how well a plant takes wet spaces. If it grew in a nursery, and I talked to Tony Avett and I had this conversation the other day. It's amazing that riparian plants, or plants that grow along creeks in wet areas, if you take them out of a nursery and put them into wet spaces, they don't do very well. And, you know, they have to kind of volunteer in that wet area, come up from seed or division or that kind of thing. So what you need to do in a wet, anybody watching me, if you have a wet area and you're planting, mound the plants up that you're planting in that area. Okay, so you plant your Carex or your Sweet Flag or your Creeping Jenny or whatever it is you want to use. Plant them on a bit of a mound and then let them spread down into that space and they'll do fine. But you can't initially just slap them into wet feet because they've been in a pot for whatever amount of time that did not have those same conditions. And so you'll stress them and then they don't perform all that well. So plant on a mound in a wet space, even with things that like wet feet, and let them put their roots down in the water rather than you putting their roots down in the water. And I think that's the best advice I can give on planting in those kind of places. Thank you guys for following along with the channel. And Dorinda, get up with me on HortTube at Gmail. And thanks everybody for participating in the giveaway and going over and making comments on the other channel. I appreciate it. There'll be a few more videos up on that channel this week. Thanks for watching.